Hello guys, today I'm going to be doing a video on CYBERPUNK 2077 with the RTX 4090 this time. We're going to be setting it up at 1440p at the max settings. Alright, let's jump into it. There we go. RT is disabled right now, but I'll enable it once we're done with the actual preset itself. And we can get on with it there. Alright, jumping into it at 1440p max settings, we are getting 120 FPS, GPU sitting at 98%, so it's being fully utilized. I'm going to be going ahead and testing at 1440p, 4K, and 8K. I'll be surprised if we can get 30 FPS at 8K max settings. I think especially with RT, we're going to definitely fall down into the 30s at that resolution, but we have DLSS, so we can use that. The frame generation update isn't out yet for this game, so we can't use that, but I think ideally for this game, we want to use that instead of using normal DLSS at something like 4K, or even 1440p if you want to get high frame rates than 120. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and enable RT, gonna have it at the max preset, and yeah, psycho mode. I'm going to apply, start the game and come back. Alright, I went ahead and skipped time to midnight, so it's very dark now, and we can see the reflections better, and this game looks amazing with ray tracing enabled. Holy, this looks good. Look at all those reflections. We're getting 70 FPS so far, without using DLSS as well. I think on average when I was playing during the day, I was getting around 85 FPS. So at nighttime it's definitely far more intensive it seems like. We're getting 60 FPS now. GPU's fully maxed out still. But man, these reflections look amazing. I think at 4K it's meant to get 44 FPS with RT enabled at max settings. But I guess we'll see if that will be the case. DLSS is definitely necessary with RT still, especially when we play the game at 4K and above. Not getting any stuttering obviously, as you would expect. Game's running beautifully, no lagging, anything like that. Lowest FPS I've seen it hit is around 65 FPS, but on average we're sitting in the 70s at nighttime, and during the day I was getting around 85 FPS like I said before. Alright, since we're so close to 60 FPS at times, I'm going to go ahead and enable DLSS with the quality preset. It does look pretty fantastic at 1440p. I've already played with it with the 3080, so I know that it does look good and it's definitely viable as an option. We're definitely losing a bit of sharpness here using DLSS, but it's very slight. It's not that big of a deal at all to be honest, and FPS is in the 90s up to the low 100s. GPU sitting at 85 to 88%, which is alright. But we're gaining around 20 to 30 FPS for free by just using DLSS, with very minimal effects on the quality of the game itself. Alright, I think it's time for us to push it up to 4K and see how this card handles there. Now at 4K, max settings, obviously no DLSS and no RT. Let's see how the card can do. Sitting at 70 FPS, not bad. This game is very GPU intensive obviously, so 60 FPS would be ideal. Ooh, dropping down to the 50s already, well, once we start driving. The low 50s even. So yeah, this game is very intensive on the GPU, so we're going to be falling down into the 50s and even the 40s, which is not what I was expecting with this card. I was guessing we're going to be sitting in the 60s and 70s, but we're sitting in the low to high 50s on average, and then dropping down to the 40s occasionally. The faster we go, the lower the FPS drops. Once I stop, FPS goes all the way up to 75 FPS, and if I exit the car, look at that, almost in the 80 FPS range. There you go, 80 FPS. So at this point I would go ahead and use DLSS, try and get that 60 FPS back, which shouldn't be too difficult since we're only 5 to 10 FPS away from that 60 FPS mark. Alright, let's go ahead and enable DLSS using the quality preset still, see how we can do. The game should look just as good as native at 4K. And look at that, 60 FPS. Okay, doing pretty good. 70 FPS even. Now this does make me a bit worried for ray tracing. We are sitting in the low to mid 50s on average without RT. So I think with RT we're going to be sitting in the low 40s, even the 30s without DLSS. Whoa! He disappeared there. That's not my fault. He just disappeared again. Nice, nice. Alright. I'm going to go ahead and pause the game, enable RT, and come back. Now with RT enabled, we're getting almost 70 FPS still, very close to it. But man, this game looks beautiful with RT enabled. It actually adds so much to the game. Quality looks amazing. FPS is going to fall down into... Oh, I forgot. We have DLSS enabled. That's what's... I'm like, well, how are we getting 60 FPS? But let's go ahead and disable DLSS. And there we go. Sitting in the mid 30s. Like I was expecting. Oh, almost in the low 30s even. Okay, it might fall into the 20s in those heavier scenes. We're getting a bit of pop-in, which I don't like, but other than that, The quality looks beautiful. It's just amazing. VRAM is sitting at 15 gigs. I've never seen VRAM that high. My 3080 only had 10 gigs, so I never saw it go past 9.5. Before this video, I had high hopes for 8K gaming, but I don't know if that's going to be possible, to be honest. We're going to be sitting in the 30s probably, even the 20s without RT. Obviously, we can use DLSS at the performance and gain maybe 60 FPS from it, but it will be challenging for sure. This card is a beefy card, but it still struggles somewhat with CYBERPUNK. That's how intensive this game is at those higher settings and at those higher resolutions. This is a good time to go ahead and enable DLSS. The menus are taking a while to load in for some reason. That's kind of annoying. And I'm going to be using the balance preset this time. And hopefully we can get 60 FPS with this setting. The sharpness of the game seems a bit less compared to native, but other than that, it looks just as good. And FPS is doing far, far better. We gained what, like 40 FPS from it, maybe 50 FPS from playing the game at native. Alright, average FPS with DLSS at the balance is around 70 FPS, but it can go as high as 80 as well in those lighter scenes. And lowest FPS I've seen it hit is around 68, 65 FPS, which is still above 60, so no problems there at all. But yeah, performance DLSS, I increased the sharpening to 0.2, and let's see how this looks and how this runs. Does look quite decent still. FPS is in the 90s. So we gained an additional, what, 20 FPS from the balance preset. FPS does fall down into the 80s though, so it's not as big of a jump as I was expecting it to be. I think for this game, if we're going to be playing the game at 4K max settings with RT, you want to rely on DLSS 2.0 with frame generation enabled to get above 100 FPS consistently. Alright, I think it's time for us to go ahead and play the game at 8K. Hopefully we can get a playable frame rate out of it. Might be just too intensive at max settings, but I guess we'll see. Alright, here we are at 8K max settings, getting 16 FPS. So once we get going, we're going to fall down into the 12 FPS range probably. We're definitely going to lose a bit of FPS once we get going. Here we go, 8K, no RT, no DLSS, at max settings. Okay. This is obviously not going to be playable at all for anyone, but man, this game looks incredibly sharp at 8K. It's actually insane. There we go, 11 FPS. So we're so close. 12 FPS. So yeah, at this point, DLSS is a must. Can't run this game at native 8K. Max settings anyway. If you play the game at medium settings, maybe you can get 30 FPS out of it, 40 FPS out of it. But at ultra, it's just too much. Alright, DLSS time. I'm going to go ahead and play the game, I think, at ultra performance, just to have the best chance of getting a playable frame rate. And let's see what we get. Oh wow, 50 FPS. That's really nice. Okay, this is really good. Game's running beautifully now, I guess. It's not ideal, obviously. We're still running in the 50s, but we're also playing the game at 8K. Crazy. This is crazy. Trying to look for any inconsistencies or glitches, but none that I can see so far in the environment. Still getting some pop-in, unfortunately. But man, we're getting pretty close to that 60 FPS mark by just playing the game with DLSS enabled. Alright, I think it might be time to go ahead and play the game with RT enabled. This will run horribly, but let's just do it anyway and see how hard we can push the card. Alright, now with RT enabled, I was forced to use DLSS at ultra performance, because if I didn't, the game was running at 1 FPS the entire time. It took me around 3 minutes to even load into the game, and I had to go through the menus at 1 FPS as well. Eventually it went up to 12 FPS in the menus, but again, very unplayable, so forced to use DLSS here. FPS is very similar to what we had at native 8K, obviously a little bit lower with RT, sitting in the low to mid 40s, and jumping up into the low 50s in those lighter scenes. Okay, so playing the game at medium settings now, still at 8K obviously. Let's jump into the settings. But we're still only getting 25 FPS, so not very playable. And I don't really think anyone wants to play the game at 30 FPS to 4090. So I'll drive around for a little bit, and then I'm going to go ahead and enable DLSS. Hopefully we can get away with playing the game at balanced DLSS. at 50 to 60 FPS, because ultra performance is a bit too aggressive in my opinion, and I don't really like the look of it as much as something like balanced or quality. Alright, still getting 20 FPS, game is stuttering a little bit, but other than that, it's looking fantastic and running decently well as well. Alright, for DLSS, going to be using the balance preset, and hopefully we can get a nice little playable experience. Wow, okay, there you go, 60 FPS, that's what I was looking for. This is definitely more of a realistic option. If you want to play the game at 8K, just play at medium settings and DLSS set to balanced. Game looks beautiful still, super sharp, and FPS isn't atrocious, sitting at what, 12 to 20 FPS. Obviously we're going to drop down into the 50s occasionally, but a mid 50s to low 60s experience is still quite nice. Alright, that's it for the video guys. If you made this far, appreciate you. As always, if you see, then a like, subscribe to my channel as well. See you next time.